a choice to make. On one hand, a really awesome guy had finally managed to bypass her father's deadly defenses and call on her without being beheaded or poisoned. She could marry this brave young man and enjoy the life of domestic bliss that women of her era were supposed to aspire to. Or she could give up the royal life and become a pirate. Guess which path she chose. The only daughter of the fiercely protective 5th century Goth king Siward, little Alfhild was raised to be modest, almost pathologically so. She was supposedly so modest that she kept her face muffled in a robe lest the sight of her incredible beauty provoke any nearby men to go mad with lust. Alfhild had good reason to be so dedicated to preserving her chastity. Her story appears in the Gested Danorum, Deeds of the Danes, a 12th century multi-volume work in Latin by historian Saxo Grammaticus. If Saxo is to be believed, virginity was pretty much the only currency a woman had, but covering her face was just one of the measures taken to keep her untouched by man. According to Saxo, King Siward did what any father of a pretty teenage daughter would do if he could. He banished her into very close keeping and gave her a viper and a snake to rear, wishing to defend her chastity by the protection of these reptiles when they came to grow up. For it would have been hard to pry into her chamber when it was barred by so dangerous a bolt. He also enacted that if any man tried to enter it and failed, he must be straightway yield his head to be taken off and impaled on a stake. The terror which was thus attached to wantonness chastened the heated spirits of the young men. There was, however, one young man whose heated spirits were inflamed by these strictures, who thought that peril of the attempt only made it nobler. His name was Alf, and he was the son of the Danish king Sigar. One day Alf burst into Alfhild's chambers, clad in bloody animal hide, to drive the reptiles insane, obviously. He killed the viper by tossing a red-hot piece of steel down its gullet. The snake he dispatched by more traditional means, a spear to the throat. Though impressed by how rash the young Dane had destroyed his reptilian defenses, Siward would accept him only if Alfhild made a free and decided choice in his favor. Alfhild was definitely charmed by the brave suitor who just killed her delightful pets. Her mother, however, was not. She told Alfhild to search her mind and to not be captivated by the charming looks or forget to judge his virtue. Swayed by her mother's wise counsel, Alfhild decided that Alf was not the man for her. Instead, she decided to trade her modesty for men's clothing and go to sea as a rampaging pirate, leading a crew of lady buccaneers. As you do. Why Alfhild decided to become a pirate is unclear. Saxo makes no attempt to explain her reasons, nor does he say why the many maidens who were of the same mind and accompanied her were of the same mind. Despite her unconventional decision, Alfhild's story was a typical historical lore of the period in one important way. The overprotection of chastity, to the exclusion of both fun and safety, speaks to the realities and values of an ancient Scandinavia. And it's certainly a piece of the other shield maiden stories, romantic tales of virgin warrior women who put down needlework and took up arms. Although he does little to explain her motivation, Saxo took pains to note that Alfhild, though unusual in her adoption of the life of a warlike rover, wasn't entirely unique. Other women, he claimed, abhorred dainty living and traded their natural softness and light-mindedness for swords and weapons. They unsexed themselves, devoting those hands to the lands which they should rather have applied to the loom. They assailed men with their spears, whom they could have melted with their looks. They thought of death, not of dalliance. Women, according to the Saxos, should be off doing lady things, and keeping their pretty faces hidden so as not to inflame the passions of unsuspecting men. That men's unbridled passion was hazardous enough to drive women to take up a weapon doesn't seem to have crossed his mind. In any case, Alfhild was a raging success as a pirate. Given that becoming a pirate wasn't simply a matter of picking up a cutlass and slapping on an eye patch, exactly how or why she succeeded is lost to the ages. Saxo is rather stingy with the details. But despite his prudish misgivings on the subject of women warriors, he concedes that Alfhild did deeds beyond the valor of women. She led her lady maidies to great riches, eventually becoming captain of yet another crew, this time of male pirates who were entranced by her beauty and devoted to her badassness. In time, Alfhild amassed a fleet of ships that preyed on vessels cruising the waters off Finland. But the good times were about to come to an end. Alfhild hadn't reckoned on one thing, the doggedness of her rejected snake-slaying suitor. Alf had never given up on the beautiful, modest maiden and pursued her on many toilsome voyages, over ice-locked seas, and through several of his own pirate battles. While sailing the coast of Finland, one day he and his crew came upon a flotilla of pirate ships. His men were against attacking such a large fleet with their few vessels, But Alfhild had have none of it, claiming that it would be shameful if anyone should report to Alfhild that his desire to advance could be checked by a few ships in his path. Oh, the irony. As the sea battle raged on, the Danes, between being massacred, wondered where their enemies got such grace of bodily beauty and such supple limbs. Alf, along with his comrade in arms, Borgar, stormed one of the enemy's ships and made for the stern, slaughtering all that withstood him. But when Borgar knocked off the helmet of the nearest pirate, Alf saw to his astonishment that it was none other than the beautiful Alfhild, the woman who he had sought over land and sea in the face of so many dangers. At that moment, Alf realized that he must fight with kisses and not with arms, that the cruel spears must be put away and the enemy handled with gentler dealings. Those gentler dealings included getting Alfhild out of those sweaty sailor's clothes and into Alf's warm bed. And so the plundering days were over. For Alfhild, at least. The language Saxo uses to describe Alfred's return to princess life is particularly telling. He writes that Alf took hold of her eagerly, made her change her man's apparel, and afterwards begot on her a daughter. What Alfhild wanted and how she felt about giving up her roving adventures is unknown, probably because Saxo didn't really care. The words he chose to make it clear that Alfhild did not have a choice. After that, history, or Saxo at least, has nothing more to say about her. Saxo's tale of the modest princess-turned-pirate may or may not be true. After all, the Gespo is a history that includes giants, witches, and dragons, alongside real-life heroes and rulers. Still, Alfhild's life as a woman warrior is likely based in a real tradition, and whether true or not, her story, and others in Saxo's rich tapestry of historical love, was claimed to be instructive by later scholars and historians in understanding early and middle Scandinavian culture. But what exactly did it teach future generations? Those children who would have listened to the tale all snuggled up around the fire on one of those endless Scandinavian winter nights? It's hard to say. To the modern reader, it's disappointing to see Alfhild's exploits subdued by a man in marriage. Why couldn't she have been a wife and a mother and a pirate? But before judging the story by a yardstick of 21st century feminism values, let's remember that Saxo was recording his version of Danish history for a Christian audience living some 700 years after Alfhild's lifetime. In Saxo's hands, Alfhild's saga itself, based on centuries-old pagan oral traditions, reinforces Christian gender norms. Alfhild is modern and chaste, but also handy with an axe and sword, in keeping with shield maiden folklore. Alf must somehow overcome her fierceness to be worthy of her. Of course, everything works out in the end because Alfhild gives up the life of a warlike rover to settle down to a role of wife and mother. Saxo makes it clear how he feels about such women in arms. In fact, he spends more time lamenting them than he does describing Alfhild's life. So in a way, the story of Alfhild is as much a dyadic fairy tale as Cinderella or Snow White. It just has more swashbuckling and snakes.